All right, guys, welcome into the Alabama Postgame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm Simone Eli alongside Matt Scalisi, joining us live from Jordan-Hare Stadium, a quiet Jordan-Hare Stadium, but just a little bit ago, Matt, I cannot even imagine what that atmosphere was like. Give us some insight as to how this game progressed and what it was like inside of that stadium.
It honestly feels like I was at two different games, Simone. It was a pretty strange shift of atmosphere. Probably the best comparison I can think of is going back to 2013, where it really did feel like Alabama was going to win that game for almost the whole game. And then things took a very sudden downturn for them in the fourth quarter. And then we were suddenly looking at a completely different atmosphere in this building. And this is sort of the reverse of that. This place was rocking all night. It was incredibly loud in here. I mean, I've been to a lot of games in this building before. It was as loud tonight as I have ever heard it. And it was loud all night, right up until what felt like the game-winning play for Auburn, which was a fourth down stop around midfield. It felt for sure that was the play that was ending the game. And, somehow things resolved themselves that Alabama got another possession. They managed to drive the full length of the field and score a tying touchdown. And the atmosphere really changed, I think, from that exact moment on. There were certainly other moments in the course of those four overtimes, and they're now emptying the few people that are still remaining here. But I mean, we went from being kind of on our toes, waiting for these fans to rush the field, to this, and it wasn't very long, and it was an incredibly sudden shift of atmosphere that I think can only happen when something truly improbable happens in a game, and that's what happened tonight. I think that last drive is going to end up, no matter how the rest of the season finishes for Alabama, I think that last drive is going to go down as part of the legacy of this team and for Bryce Young.
No question. No doubt about that. If you're just tuning in, this is the Alabama Postgame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. Matt Scalisi is joining us live from Jordan-Hare Stadium after everything just unfolded in the 86th Iron Bowl, which went into overtime. And not only did it go into overtime, it went into overtime. 4 overtimes there on the Plains in one of the most historic Iron Bowl games that we will ever see. And I feel like we say that every single time the game is at Auburn because crazy things have happened. But this was insane. I was looking at the win probability put out there by ESPN. It was actually 99.9 with 1 minute and 27 seconds remaining in the fourth quarter. Auburn had a 99.9% win probability. And to see how things unfolded there, Bryce Young taking the Tide on a 97-yard drive. Matt, I have to admit that when they started that drive with a minute or so to go, not a lot of folks felt as though they were going to go the distance, having seen what had happened in the first 3 and almost 4 entire quarters. I mean, there was just Bryce Young had no time. There were so many issues offensively. Jameson Williams is out of the game. I don't think that many people outside of maybe the 11 guys on the field felt as though Bama was going to go down the field like that and score to force this game into overtime.
I don't know. I didn't think he was going to, for sure. I don't think a lot of people felt like Alabama had another touchdown drive in them. I say another. They didn't have any before that. You know? I mean, it took the entire length of this game for Alabama to put a touchdown drive together. It was a lot of reasons too. I'm already seeing folks in here saying offensive line was the problem. I think that was certainly a problem. It wasn't the only problem. It didn't help that the best skill player on this offense, Jameson Williams, got himself ejected from the game with a really unnecessary, careless. I think his emotions got the best of him in that moment, and he ends up targeting a punt returner, and he gets ejected from the game in the first half. And fortunate for the Tide that it happened in the first half still, so he will be eligible to play against Georgia. Sure. But you've got that play. You've got a number of other penalties that are things that we haven't seen Alabama do all year. We saw a huge penalty for a player continuing to play after his helmet came off. I'm not sure that I've ever even seen that happen before in a game.
Yes. No doubt. No doubt.
So many things went wrong for Alabama in this game. So many things, so many mistakes. I think it's also it should not, and I'm not saying this to try and make Alabama look better than they were, but we have to credit this Auburn defensive front seven in this game.
No doubt.
An absolutely incredible performance. They were extremely aggressive. They got home to Bryce Young a number of times. I want to say they had 7 sacks in this game. It might have been more. I might be undercounting it. I mean, it was a stifling performance from the front seven. They really didn't give up much in the run game until very late in this game.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that Alabama found a way to put a scoring drive together at the end and tie this game was impressive considering how Auburn played all night defensively. I think the other part of this too, that sort of stuns you when you look at the end of it is, Bryce Young ends up with 317 yards passing. Now his percentage, his completion percentage is not great by any means, 25 out of 51.
Sure.
But 2 touchdowns, an interception, 317 yards. And most importantly, I think he got the very coveted Heisman moment on a day where really the other main competitor for that award, CJ Stroud, did not have a good game, lost in his rivalry game. We're now heading into Atlanta with an Alabama team that is coming off a highly emotional win and a quarterback that I think is going to get talked about all week as perhaps the Heisman frontrunner at this point.
Yeah, Matt,
and he was having a terrible game until about 1 minute left in the game.
But showed up when it was most important. And let's not forget, I mean, yes, maybe having a terrible game, but was not getting a whole lot of help. I mean, we're talking about the protection was breaking down, and like you said earlier, we had to credit Auburn's defensive line. And if Bama thinks that that's the best they're going to see when it comes to defensive line, they better figure it out before next week, because Georgia's defensive line is a whole nother level. If you're just tuned in. It's the Bama Postgame Show. The Tide get it done in one of the most historic games in college football probably ever, but certainly one of the most historic Iron Bowls ever. 24-22, the final. The Tide score 10 fourth-quarter points, then win it in 4 overtimes. Had to go to the 2-point conversion rule, which, by the way, I think totally takes away from college football. But that's another topic for another day. You look at what the Tide has done, Matt, to this point, I have to reference a little bit what Nick Saban said earlier this week when he was asked about going into games and expecting to win. He said that our guys are always going to get the best game from everybody. Like, we are going to get the best, whether it's fair or not. Everyone wants to beat us. And I always feel like his comments, his rants are so timely, because it always comes to fruition in some way. Like, okay, he foresees the future. I don't understand this guy. He just knows what the heck's going on in life sometimes. I mean, it's crazy.
I think that he had look. I don't think he's the only one that had a sense that this game was going to be closer than people thought it was going to be either, because there's been a lot of confidence coming from Auburn all week. They did not have their heads down after 3 straight losses. There's been a lot of optimism coming from players all week, from former players who sometimes have a little bit of insight into what's going on in the program. Tim Cook from Apple, famous Auburn alum, felt he was feeling a little bit confident last night. There was just something going on, something about this game that made folks in Auburn think that this was not going to be some blowout. They were not going to roll over for Alabama, and they absolutely didn't. Again, I think Auburn deserves a lot of credit for how they played in this game. I think Alabama ultimately comes away with the win, and it is going to be one that they remember. It's going to be one that they treasure, because wins in Jordan-Hare don't come easily. But I think that there's got to be a little begrudging respect from the Alabama fan base tonight for what Auburn did in this game. They took Alabama to the wire in a way that nobody else has this season, other than Texas A&M, who outright beat them. But I mean, this was a heavyweight title fight, and the two teams, I think they sort of waited around all night to see if somebody else was going to make the big play. And
Yeah.
in the end, Bryce Young steps up. He hits really. I mean, John Mechie, one of his sort of senior playmakers on this team, makes the game-winning play. But Ja'Cory Brooks, a relative newcomer here, makes arguably the play that they needed the most, that the touchdown that eventually ties the game.
Yep. No doubt about that. Another person I feel like we need to shout out, and somebody brought this up in the comments a second ago, was Will Riker. I mean, that guy,
yes.
I mean, you think about the pressure that's on you. I mean, whether it's the extra point to tie the game, when you get into overtime, that situation. I mean, I know I'm trembling, and I know these guys are like, this is just what they're programmed to do. But Lord Almighty, like, man, I was nervous as heck just watching the young man line up.
Ice water in his veins. And look, honestly, both kickers ended up making some pretty big ones tonight. And you got to think, too, how much it was in his head that there was a missed field goal earlier in the game. It wasn't his fault. There was a bobbled snap. But when something like that happens, it can rattle you. It can get in your head. And Will Riker comes up with two really clutch field goals that were, you're absolutely right, a huge part of why Alabama ends up winning this game.
Yeah. So Matt, I guess the question now is this, all right? And there's a ton of Tide fans that are excited about this game, as they should be. There were frustrating moments. There are people calling for coaches' heads on social media, but at the end of the day, this is a rivalry game. You never know what's going to happen in rivalry games. The Iron Bowl is always a mess, for lack of a phrase I can't say on the broadcast, but you never know what you're going to get in this game. Bama pulls it out. What is the mentality now? Because it seems like there's a multitude of things. One, some momentum, obviously, because you win your rivalry game, you're headed to the postseason. Two, we have to go breathe because that was exhausting. We spent four overtimes,
no time for it.
No time to breathe. And three, holy crap, we have things we have to get fixed and adjusted. I feel like all of those emotions right now are going in through the minds of the coaching staff, the players, on their way back to Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fallout that we don't know yet from this game. And actually, somebody here in the comments just brought up the Brian Robinson injury. We know that he came out of the game late and didn't go back in for the rest of the game. I don't know. I have not seen Nick Saban's press conference, so full disclosure, I don't know if there's any information about it. I saw him walk off the field under his own power and into the injury tent. He was not feeling good. I can tell you that. I was right next to the injury tent, and he was making some noise. He was not happy in there. So hopefully for Brian and for the team, it was a painful but not serious injury, and that he'll be ready to go again. But I think that's bringing that up. That's another point. A lot of guys had to step up tonight that probably weren't expecting to play very much in this game. And that can be a big positive experience too. I mean, you go back to 2017. The way Alabama ends up winning that national championship is a bunch of young guys who didn't play a lot during the season come up huge down the stretch for Alabama, and they had to have some of that tonight. I think with Jameson Williams going out and with look, I don't think Trey Sanders is young at this point, but he has not played a lot this season. Came up huge, made some really big plays for this team down the stretch with Brian Robinson out.
Yeah.
There were some substitutes in on the offensive line too, and obviously it wasn't a great night for the offensive line. But I think Alabama is going to need some youth to come up big down the stretch against Georgia and whoever else they end up playing after that.
Yes. A lot of folks in the comments saying they had multiple heart attacks during the game. They needed Pepto-Bismol during the game. Listen, y'all, I'm 3 days from being induced. Okay, I was scared I was going into labor. All right, I was like having my unborn child was doing the most in there as I'm screaming.
Imagine this baby has got to be wondering what kind of world they're entering right now.
I mean, honestly, in a lot of ways, but certainly when it comes to this rivalry game, for sure. Matt, just a crazy situation out there on the plains. I know that you enjoyed every minute of it. Final thoughts. Just want your thoughts here, quick. Just this entire situation. Bama gets it done. Nick Saban didn't have a voice for a second when he first answered, was in the post-game press conference, or not in the press conference, but in the interview with CBS. Then his voice just came back to life in the second question. I don't know. It just seemed like overall coach was just very grateful that the Tide were able to get it done. A win is a win type of mentality. And ultimately he went off the field smiling, whereas Brian Harston went off the field not smiling.
I mean, I think it's going to be a humbling experience for Alabama, but it can be a unifying one and an energizing one when you do something like this. They had to put faith in guys who had not gotten it done all night, and they came through. And that's a big thing. That can bring a team together when something like that happens.
Sure.
Simone, we got a commenter saying
I
you
got
need to
this
name the baby Bryce.
Some folks were saying that I needed to name my child Nicholas or Nicholas Bryce, things like that on Twitter. So I'm gonna ask my husband. I'll see what he says. I can't make any guarantees.
I'm guessing that's not going to come through for you there, but I
have to agree.
I will say, I think just from me as somebody who's watched a lot of these. I mean, I probably watched 30 plus Iron Bowls at least, and there's been a lot of truly crazy ones, and this one, right? I mean, I'm fresh off of it, but
I know
this one is up there, man. This was absolutely nuts. Just the shift in energy,
yes,
in such a short period of time. I mean, this thing was over. Auburn was going to win this game. They were dominating the entire game, and to have Alabama do what they did down the stretch, it almost doesn't feel like it really happened. It feels like there were two separate games somehow.
Yes.
And I think we're all gonna still be processing this one for a while, but we're gonna remember it for sure.
There is no doubt about that. Matt, thank you so much for all your great coverage out there from Jordan-Hare Stadium. Just getting a firsthand experience, letting us know what that feeling was like. Obviously, when you watch it on TV, it's one thing, but when you're actually there and experience the energy of the building, man, it's a whole nother.
Well, I will. I haven't seen the game on TV yet, but Mechie caught the 2-point conversion right in my face. So if you see a guy with curly, kind of thinning hair right in front of John Mechie, that's me.
Gotta love it. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into the Alabama Postgame Show. I know a lot of folks are going to go enjoy a cigar, maybe a shot or two, a drink or two after tonight. You've more than earned it. But what a crazy night. Bama gets it done in 4 overtimes. The first time the Iron Bowl has ever gone into overtime. You can't just have one, of course. You got to do it. If you're going to do it, you might as well do it. 4 overtimes, 24-22, the final over the Auburn Tigers. The tie will probably move up to second, I would assume, in the playoff rankings, potentially with their Ohio State loss. We will see on Tuesday. But, of course, Bama now turns the page to Georgia in the SEC title game next week in Atlanta. A big one. Georgia is, without question, the best team in the country, has been all year. Bama has a lot of tuning up to do before that game kicks off next week at 2:30. From Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But guys, thanks so much for tuning in to the Alabama Postgame Show, brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. For Matt Scalisi, live from Auburn, I'm Simone Eli. Y'all enjoy the rest of your Saturday evening.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart of healthcare.